Ladies and gentlemen, I am truly delighted now to introduce our first keynote speaker, Rikke Toft Nørgård, Associate Professor at the Danish School of Education, Aarhus University, Denmark. At the university, she also serves as steering group member of Center for Higher Education Futures. She's elected board member of the National Danish Network for Educational Development in Higher Education and editor-in-chief of the Danish Journal of Higher Education. Rikke's, I'm sure I am not pronouncing your name correctly, I apologize. Research and projects focus on the complexities, challenges, and potentials of higher education futures in the intersection of design, technology, culture, and philosophy. Currently, she is leading and coordinating the Europe Horizon project on empowered participation through ideating cultural worlds and environments. Now, before we begin, if you would like to ask questions, here's a QR code to capture your questions along the way. Okay, so the plan is that she's going to talk, and then we're going to have about 10 minutes for her to take your questions, right? Now, if there are questions that she cannot address, we're going to channel that. Hopefully, maybe you can repost that for the panel discussions because she will be back. Okay, so with that said, let's give a warm welcome to Professor Rikke Toft Nørgård.
So, thank you so much for inviting me. 11,000 kilometers at the other side of the world. I'm a little bit jet lagged, haven't slept that much, but that's all into the future or the past. This present is actually the past back home because they are sleeping and it's not Tuesday yet in Denmark. I'm so delighted to be invited here. Let me know if I should speak up or anything, then I'll take my teacher voice on. I'm here to talk to you about bolder higher education futures. I promise it will be very complicated and a lot of speaking, a lot of philosophy, a lot of high-level thinking, but then also try to think a little bit more about some of the implications of this. So, I was supposed to be here last year, but I ended up like this instead. But that's all in the past. Now I'm here, allowed to fly again. And my very good colleague, Ron Barnett, took over, so that was also very nice. We wrote a book together, so I know we were in good hands. But I really, really also like the theme of last year. So I will also try to actually speak to that as well. Because that was really my theme. This is also really my theme. But yeah, I was lying there. You can see I was pretty bummed, trying to keep my chin up. So what I'll do today is try to think about the last 10 years I've spent exploring hybrid human hopepunk futures. So I worked with like that on a very design-oriented level, a very philosophical level, development level, having projects, doing teaching, and so on. So I'm also a teacher practicing future education. I've been leading the masters on ICT-based educational design at Aarhus University. I'm also a designer developing future education, so I've had a position as assistant professor and associate professor at the Center for Digital Media and Educational Development in Aarhus. I'm also a researcher or a philosopher. I'm not a philosopher, I'm told I can do philosophical thinking. It's a big difference if you are a philosopher. So I'm also doing research, writing on future education, and I'm also a leader leading these projects like the Europe Horizon project. Then, first and foremost, I think what characterizes my thinking is I'm quite hope-punk, whatever that means, we can talk about that, and utopian, not as a blueprint utopian. I'm not zusammenmarschieren or have a fascist vision for how the society should look, but like everyday utopias, bottom up, trying to cultivate the dreams that are there within an institution and make them flourish. So I'm doing applied philosophy, you could say, trying to materialize the ideal in the real and near it approximately while preserving the diversity. We shouldn't agree, we should agree to disagree and then try to figure out what that future look like. And now I have like a tech support because we have like three things going, but before we move on, dive into it, this QR code here should hopefully take you, oh, it didn't, sorry. I actually have like, yeah, I'm here. but you are not here, of course. So that didn't make sense. So look how bummed I were. Now we like just taking a quick tour. Look at all my work. Look how clever I am. And now the important part, the QR code, right? You'll get the slides afterwards. So the QR code here should hopefully take you to a Mentimeter. So before we dive into it, I just wanted to take a little second to let us start this morning thinking about the first two words that comes to mind when you think of great and bold higher education futures. And you also have the code up there. You can just go there and go to menti.com and then put in the code. So the first two words that comes to mind, because we're here thinking about that, when you think about great and bold higher education futures. There's no right or wrong answers. And if you haven't done it yet, you can also be a little bit more game-oriented, so you can see the words up there you would like to highlight, and if you put those in, they will grow. If you want to game the system. So what we can see in the middle, you have the words that are larger than the rest. So it's definitely something about transformative, being inclusive, being daring, having impact, but also being fun, being agile, engaging. But yes, as you can see, the words in the middle that kind of grows is including, daring, impact, and engaging. So how to connect these while we dream would perhaps be a question for us all. I'll also share the results with you afterwards, because this is our shared cloud here, and you keep the Menti open. We'll return to it a couple of times just to kind of reflect together. A nice thing with Menti is it's also anonymous, so you can really disagree and put in your own voice without being, I don't know, fired or something. Great, let's jump back while we think about the words that were up there. And let's see, can you shout if it seems like I'm changing slides here and I forgot myself up here? Yeah, so if we go back to the slides. Yeah, yes. Thank you, sorry. Yes. Great, so let's start a little bit more of a depressing place. In my own writing and in this talk, I'll try to address the overall theme of the conference here, from good to great and education futures. And you could say, if you look across higher education theory and philosophy, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, it's something we are quite in agreement on, that it's sorely needed when considering the current ruined and ruinous educational landscape we find ourselves in, whether we call it marketization, competitiveness, excellence, performativity, neoliberalism, or whatever names we call the branding university is also a name for those. And it's not, yeah, that's work. And it's not new, you could say. One of the focal points in my work and my colleagues' work that I've written with across the last 10 years is to say, okay, we are amongst the ruins, but let's play amongst the ruins and try to work together to imagine bolder futures, wider and wilder higher education, and contribute to higher education futures worth having. And especially for today's talk, and that's also why I'm looking here and have a manuscript, is because this is the first time I'm trying to pull my thinking together from across the last 10 years. So that's what I've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks. And when I've done that, I really try to highlight all the principles and recommendations that came out of this development work, project work, philosophy-like thinking, and so on and so forth. But it's not something new. So already in 1996, actually 30 years ago, Reddings called for a revitalization, a re-evolutionization, I cannot say that word, re-evolutionization of a university in ruins. So actually already then we were thinking about how to imagine and enact bold futures. Is not something new. We still need to see beyond the ruinous landscape of present-day university, but without recourse to romantic nostalgia, without withdrawing ourselves, raising the bridge and going back into the ivory tower, no matter that the ivory tower never existed, but like it exists at least in the minds of society. So let's not dwell in the ruins, but play in the ruins, and whatever that means. And it's also sorely needed for this imagination crisis. Other people, both across from industry, society, but also from higher education, says that we are captured in, caught in. So there's actually this urgent call growing across from 1996, the last century, last millennium actually. I'm feeling very old now. And up till now, so we are what some future studies people would say caught like a deer in the headlight when we think about the future. We see the future as something that is already here. So that's a big crisis, because then we are actually not creating the future, we are just forecasting the future that was already handed to us. And then we lose control of the future. So if we know what will happen, if we know what needs to be done, if we know what we should do, like we need 10,000 engineers, or we need to solve the climate crisis, or we need to do something about generative AI, and then we do the policies, and then we just implement them, then it's not a future that we are creating for ourselves, it's a future that is handed to us. It's already here. So that is what we call in the inner circle, so this is like the futures come from Boas, is like the let's see if I can do like this. The projected future here you can see is like a narrow path. Then you have the probable future, which is very narrow as well, so we have like a couple of options. Then we have the plausible futures that are more open, the possible futures. And then in recent years, he added actually preposterous futures, because we were simply not imagining wildly enough. We were still kind of boring in our imagination. And he's from industry, and it's like future studies done when you try to do inventions like, I don't know, cars and stuff. But I think it might also have something to do for us in higher education. So how to come from like the closed one-way future to the wild and more widely open future? So one way would be to think through different concepts when we think about what the future can do and how we can arrive at it rather than getting it handed. And one of these concepts is the concept of hopepunk. So to achieve this in the current educational landscape, to be a bit more wild and wilder, but still having like concrete methods for us, is something that requires, I think, or at least in my writing, hopepunk thinking and practices. So according to Adja Romano, hopepunk signifies an insistence on hope, humanity, virtuousness, and possible futures, not as purely naive, optimist, or utopian state, but as an active political choice, made with self-awareness that things might be bleak or even frankly hopeless, but you're going to keep hoping, loving, being kind nonetheless. I think that's really needed where we find ourselves in the world, whatever we're thinking about. Hopepunk signals a genuinely and sincerely activist spirit of fighting for something worth fighting for, and demanding more virtuous, kind-hearted, and desirable futures. So hopepunk is the opposite of accepting the inevitable future. It signals an anti-nostalgic, forward-looking stance against the grim, dark, and encroaching future in the singular. So this is what I've been trying to think about for the last 10 years, and I stumbled on this concept of hopepunk. Hopepunk. Which is actually from media studies, and it's just a term for like film that has like a optimist spirit in it, and then there's a grim dark, which is a bit more bleak, but it kind of captures a spirit that we need to reinstate in higher education to be able to actually live here and have life worth having in the university, both for ourselves and our students and our leaders and society and the world and everything else. So actually using hopepunk to, I'm really multitasking here, actually using hopepunk to go from the projected, probable, and possible to the possible and even into the preposterous. And the green one you can see down here is thinking about what would then be our preferable futures. While still keeping them open, we don't need to agree, but what is the shared vocabulary, the shared imagination here? So, before jumping from the present and the bleakness of our imagination crisis, let's return to think what that would actually require. So what would we need, before I jump into my last 10 years, what would we need to move beyond the imagination crisis? And what would we need to be able to see and work for more wild and wild futures, in your view? Like, what would be something that could give us that hope, give us that spirit, enable us to do anything at all, even to move away from the imagination crisis? What would we need? And it can be something we need from the world, from each other, from our leaders, from our students. The students need from us. So anything can go up there. So for example, we would need the inclusion of minority experiences as voices, more dedication, patience, and tolerance, more honest opinions, an education that champions creative and critical thinking, growth mindset that embrace failure, more empathy, more collaboration, more genuine collaboration in which we learn together and think for others and have safe spaces to fall, and not being afraid to share new and different options. Less constraints, more support for galloping, and fearlessness to explore, more positive stories, and not afraid to try something new, to celebrate the future, to have openness, to have wisdom beyond knowing, to knowing what matters, to have grace, humility, genuine openness, and less hypocrisy, and so on. Like, I'm almost crying here, sorry. Like, these are really beautiful visions and needs and wants and desires and passions that are driving from the bottom up our universities. So one of the big questions would be and they really resonate with me and my work, I would say. So one question would be, what recommendations and principles would we then need to clear the ground, clear the sky, that would enable us to actually live by those beautiful desires? So, reading my work, Rikke, reading Rikke, sounds a little bit egocentric, but here we go. There's like 4 themes, and I also asked generative AI to help me a little bit to understand myself, because I'm very messy and fussy, and it's good at clearing stuff up, and then we disagree, and then, you know, I take control of the text again, so, you don't really understand me, and then we work a little bit through that. But what we arrived at, and also it made beautiful pictures for it, and we didn't agree always, so it actually took like 48 hours to agree on the pictures as well. We still don't agree on the pictures, but we agree on the words and the principles. There's 4 themes that I will try to walk us through. So the university as ontological and ethical being, the university as playful and relational becoming, the university as a public, ecological, and planetary actor, and the university as cultural, co-creative, and civic partner. And what is important here is, like, they have like a similar, you'll get into the motion, they have like a similar structure. So they're all built on some text. Then I try to deduct the principles, and then I try to be a little bit more concrete than I usually am. So trying to have like some more concrete implications of this for us, for higher education and the university, to arrive at that beautiful thing we just saw. So the first theme builds on, well, it builds on a lot more of my work, but like I try to drag out things from these 5 works here. And each one, because I like structure, I'm actually not that chaotic, so I like structure, so there's like 3 principles for each theme. So this first theme brings together these 5 foundational contributions that reimagine the university as a site of ontological, ethical, and pedagogical transformation. Very much like your theme for this year's conference, I would say. And what it highlights is, like, it uses a metaphor of the jellyfish to highlight that learning is always flexible, is always moldable. It should not be people that mold themselves to the pedagogy, but the other way around. It's also an institutional metaphor. I'm trying to go like this again, 2 seconds. It's also a institutional metaphor, because our institution should also be moldable and soft, rather than hard and unmoving. So the first principle. Now I really feel like a rock star. So the first principle, reimagine higher education as a gelatinous and entangled space of learning where knowledge swarms, tumbles, and unfolds in unpredictable and effective ways. So, as I said, the metaphor of the jelly I introduced in 2014, it was actually my first academic paper on pedagogy, foregrounds the incoherence, fragility, and transformative potential of learning processes. So learning, in this view, in our higher education, is not a matter of reaching fixed outcomes or learning goals, but of enduring crashes, navigating knowledge vacuums, and encountering crippled ideas. So we need to align our educational strategies to those kind of things. So the jelly becomes a metaphor for the student adrift in a sea of vulnerability and power, glimpsing both golden unicorns and educational monsters. So these glimpses, whether of allure or terror, demand a pedagogy of care and solidarity. We need to meet the student halfway out there in the ocean rather than leave them to drift around on their own. These principles again call for a pedagogy that embraces the weirdness, exhaustion, and existential fatigue of academic life, also our own, and that recognizes the infinite open-ended nature of learning. So we need to be jellyfishes out there in the sea, swarming with all the other jellyfish, and showing our own vulnerability, our own failures, our own existential terrors. More concretely, some design implications is that for this to happen, we need curriculum design that allow for non-linear, emergent learning paths that embrace failure, detours, and transformations. So we need time, perhaps also, I would say. I'm just multitasking a little bit again. I want to see you. We also need assessment systems that must be reimagined to recognize diverse and unpredictable learning outcomes that may not align with predefined criteria. We need to allow ourselves and our students to be surprised. And we need strategic planning that should foreground the university's role as a world-making institution embedded in local and global life worlds. So we need an institution that feels like a safe place or a home. The next principle says that higher education must reclaim the lived body as central to academic existence, design spaces and systems that support embodied and yes, thank you. An ecological being. So here we are in this hall with our bodies, even though it might feel more like brains on a stick sometimes. So we need to remember we are living beings. We have emotions. We fall in love. We fall out of love. Our cat dies, and all sorts of other things that impact our learning experience and our academic life. So we need to make sure that we actually have a university for the body. Academic life is not disembodied pursuit of knowledge, but a lived, fleshy, and affective experience. We need to have our feelings, our emotions with us to live and to feel knowledge as something lived by and lived through. The university must therefore become a bodyscape also, not only a landscape or a learning space, a space that supports emotional resonance in the room, ecological sustainability of being able to live where we are, and have these more fleshy utopias. So we need corpo reality and not only reality. We need ecosystems and not only systems. So the idea is that thinking is also caring for all that is human, recognizing that academic existence is inseparable from life itself. How do we ensure that for ourselves? How do our leaders ensure that for us? And how do we ensure that for our students? So some design implications of this is that higher education, thank you, is that campus design and institutional policy should prioritize well-being, and not well-being in the psychological sense, but in the embodied sense. It feels nice to walk around at the campus. I feel happier. My strides have like this floatiness to them because I'm proud and happy, and I don't want to go home. We can ask ourselves if that's the case. It's a little bit hot outside from someone from Denmark, I would say. So I'm actually quite okay in here right now. Pedagogical practice should also incorporate embodied learning, affective engagement, and ecological awareness. And most importantly, perhaps, institutional culture itself should support our vulnerabilities, our relationality, and the full spectrum of human experience in academic life. So if there's something we do not have here, we should bring it in here, whether it be our children or our toys or our mothers and fathers. I brought my mother to conference a couple of times. That was nice. I brought my children to my PhD defense and put them on the table. That was scary for my supervisor, but that was also nice. The last principle of this theme is that the university must be a poetic and speculative space of becoming, where utopian imagination and existential wonder guide the pursuit of this. So here we need to think about if the university sings in our soul. Do we write poems to our university? Do we ask our students to write poems to their disciplines, fall in love with them? And if they fall in love, pursue them madly, not in a stalker kind of way, but in a nice way. And do we have space to speculate? There's this, I don't necessarily love Rumsfeld, but he has this concept of unknown unknowns that are quite important. If you want to have spaces of innovation, innovation can never be what we already know. That's not innovation. That's just reinventing something that is already there or rediscovering something. And perhaps we should even have the ambition of allowing our students to not only rediscover, but discover. And for that, we need the concept of unknown unknowns. The things we do not know that we do not know, and we do not even know how we will come to know them. That requires something quite different. So some of the design implications of this last theme is that universities should support speculative, poetic forms of inquiry that challenge conventional epistemologies. So one of my research publications is a poem. A part of my PhD was research music videos, and so on. My PhD program head didn't really understand how my PhD could go through with flying colors, but that's about having a seriousness in the method. Like, we shouldn't take the university light. I really, really, really love the university, but we should not underestimate it and what it's capable of. Like, we can do whatever we want to do. I think, like, I haven't been fired yet. I'm currently on the professor track, which is nice. So someone can see some sort of, I wouldn't say logic, that's perhaps a big word, but meaning, perhaps not use, but importance with my being at the university. And I think that's important. The second theme, and we might be going faster, like Pippi Longstocking, which is this character from said, I've never done this before, so I'm sure I can do it. That's like my spirit right now. And wherever we end up will be good enough. Like, so we might not go through all the slides. That is good enough. Let's spend some time here together rather than rush through them. You can have them. I'll be here for the whole conference. Come and grab me, challenge me, write a poem with me. I don't know, we can do that in the workshop. So the second theme I've been working with, like, for the last 7 years, is the university as a playful and relational becoming. So it's, again, to deliver on all the things we just talked about here. Playfulness, not play, importantly, but playfulness has a role to play. Pun actually not intended. And again, from this, we have 3 principles. And what we can see play doing is actually allowing our students to forget themselves and be there for the others, like the solidarity we're talking about. We can forget ourselves and be there with our students. And even my dear colleague Nick Withen that works with playful leadership, even our leaders should be playful. Even our institutions should be playful. So what does that mean? Well, at the heart of the university lies a commitment to openness, diversity, and wonder. It's a space where torn ideas and broken thoughts are not discarded but welcomed as part of the academic journey. So here again, you can see like the resonance from the last theme coming here. So playfulness, playful higher education can be a method to realize the philosophical foundation we talked about in the first theme. So if we look across the 40 play scholars in higher education that I've been working with, what we see looking across it is that this openness that are in the playful spirit invites a kind of risky play. We just talked about the unknown. Like in playfulness, we are always going for the unknown. We are always posing the play question, what if? What if the moon was a cheese? What if you were now the dad? But also university and academic what ifs. What would happen if we do this instead? So rather than going by the methods and going by the motions, doing the future that was just handed to us, it allows us to say, not how can we, which is a design question, but what if, which is a way more open question. So to dance with the unknown is to risk one's own worldview. For a university to be playful is to risk itself. To experience discomfort and transformation, and to engage in sacred playfulness, not profane playfulness, in yes saying, not saying yes together, but saying yes in our own voices. We are invited to wonder at something, but also to wonder at nothing. I think, like I say sometimes in the Danish keynotes I'm giving, there's too little dagdrømmeri in the university. Dagdrømmeri is daydreaming. And I think we should daydream way more than we do. Like, just take a day and stare out the window, see what happens. Or a week, or a month. Then the leaders probably will begin to be a little bit worried, but it might be important. Some of the design implications here would be to assure that our curriculum design includes space for existential inquiry, imaginative exploration, and philosophical playfulness. To have an academic culture that supports risky play, put ourselves at risks, put our institutions at risk, our leaders should put themselves at risk. To question disciplinarity and institutional norms, like when I put my children on the PhD defense table to prove a point about embodied gameplay experiences. I took a risk, but it was a good risk. It made it all make sense. Learning environments should be designed to foster wonder, ambiguity, and the freedom to think otherwise. We should not agree. We should agree to disagree. And for this, we need support of dissent, dialogue, and shared decision-making from our leaders. We cannot do this on our own. Which leads us to the next principle, that the playful university must stage atmospheric places that invite playful thinking, doing, and being. So as I just mentioned, playful higher education does not emerge in a vacuum. It requires a home, a nest, or a place. So if we look around at our campus, are they really playful? And playful, I don't mean Lego bricks and feathers and googly eyes and stuff like that. I mean agoras, clearings, things that can be moved around so it suits our places, things that can move us around so we suit the university. Like this room is not so playful, I would say. So we need more exploratoriums of wonder, or in the German, Wunderkammer. We need experimentariums of creativity, and perhaps most importantly, we need collaboratoriums of fellowship, solidarity, and communality. We need to be together. We need to forget ourselves. We need to not compete against each other. And again, for that, we need certain kind of institution, certain kind of leadership, because we are competing against each other all the time, and it's breaking our hearts. Sorry, now, yeah, I'm going off script. I'm going back to the script again. So the university must therefore imagine and design for playfulness through its practices and pedagogies, through our own lives and the choices we make and exemplify. The university as a place is not static but dynamic, always in the process of becoming, never being something, always trying to become something, always open to being swept off its feet by playfulness itself. So some of the design implications here is that we need a campus. We need a campus that is designed as places and that are negotiated as through playful curiosity, creativity, and communality. So we should be allowed to do all sorts of things with all sorts of materials in all sorts of places if it's important. Learning environments likely should include open, experimental, student-driven, democratic spaces for cooperation, collaboration, and co-creation. So sometimes my students make up their own assessment criteria, or my student make up their own curriculum, or my student do their own teaching. My mom was the generation that kicked out all of the professors of Aarhus University when she went there, and then they took over the university. Now they are professors and they're not kicked out, and that's nice that I'm not kicked out. But perhaps we need to learn from that, to allow room for our students to. The university is also our students' university. It's not only ours. It's not up to us to decide what they should learn, how they should learn, what they need, and what they're passionate about. And we don't need to learn the same things, I would say. So you can see there are 4 themes. We are definitely not going through them all, right? So I'm going to prioritize in a second. But the last principle here is that the playful university must work to embed playfulness into the heart of pedagogy, curriculum, and institutional practice. So playfulness is not extracurricular activities. It's not something we do on the side or in our spare time. We will never be playful doing that because our students and we are simply working too hard. So we would never prioritize those sort of silly, useless things, right? They need to be at the heart of the curriculum, at the heart of the learning space, at the heart of our assessment before it works, before they believe us, before they have time. I think one interesting thing is like the students, they really don't like playfulness because they don't have time for that. They need to get the grades and go get the job, and they don't understand that being playful at the university in this way that I'm talking about here is actually what will get them the job and what will get them the grade and what will get them there in the end in a way that they actually don't kill themselves on the inside in the process to be something they perhaps do not want to be. So for this to work, and for this theme to work, we need teaching practices that include playful moods, modes, materials. We also need to think about who we are ourselves in the classroom, the lecture hall, when we meet each other, when we do research together, when we set up a project, what we appreciate and what we give merit to. Is it only the money, or is it also the risks, so to speak? It was very interesting for me getting this very big EU project. Suddenly I was not invisible anymore in my institution. I don't know how I feel about that. So institutional policies should support relational pedagogies. They should merit solidarity, not performance. It should merit academic curiosity, not doing what we already will know being the outcome of a project, and the cultivation of collegiality and solidarity. That's what should be what we are meriting more. Not that we are not allowed to excel and be awesome. We are, but we should also merit solidarity. And so now I have a choice to make. There are 2 themes. I think we'll go for this one. This is the weirdest one. I like weirdness. The last theme is from my EU project. You can read about that online if you want. So this last theme here, and its 4 contributions, really work to explore, yes, they're up there, explore the evolving relationship we have with our planet, not only collegiality between us humans, but also with other species, other cultures, as was up there, also the ones we do not understand. I don't know how to be colleague with a glacier or a mockingbird, but I need to figure it out. So the theme is that we need to explore evolving relationship, not only here inside the university, as we did with the first 2 themes, but also the university and its relation to the world and to society. So this theme challenged the notion of the university as a secluded campus or abstract knowledge factory, and imagines or reimagine it as a playful, porous, participatory institutions that also put itself at risk in society and for the world. So drawing on the philosophical, pedagogical, and design-based perspectives here, the text in this theme articulate a vision of higher education that is not only in the world, but also with, for, and even by the world. In its radical form, we are also asking how the university becomes a place for the mockingbird, for the oak trees, because if the universities do not take care of the mockingbird and the oak trees in their own right, and not thinking about their use or their meaning to us, also like the ugly insects, like the mosquitoes. Let's take the mosquitoes. Who are taking care of the mosquitoes, if not the university, right? We also need to have a university for the mosquitoes. And the wasps, I don't like wasps. And spiders. Of course also kittens and puppies, but someone will take care of those people. Creatures. Well, that was what I learned. That's a nice word for us all, coming from like a talk I visited in Aarhus University recently on inclusion and diversity amongst all of us. And the term they came up with across all genders, religions, cultures was creatures. We are creatures. And I think creatures is nice. It's a little bit freaky in a nice way. It's also a little bit playful. And it also allows for the wasps and the mosquitoes and the puppies. So the first principle here is to have a university that becomes playful through dissolving the boundaries between campus and society to foster academic citizenship in, with, and for the public. So we need to re-envision the university as something that is not only a knowledge provider or a knowledge consultant or a knowledge producer, but is out there with and within the world. Not in a way that we are in the surface to society. That's where we find ourselves in trouble with the neoliberal paradigm, like how do we give our students the right competencies? How do we show our worth? What is the use? At least that's, I wouldn't call it dialogue, the discourse in Denmark at the moment. And we will always lose that because we will break our own back as a university and higher education if we go down that road. Then we will stop being a university. It will stop being higher education. It will just be a competence factory or being useful. And that's, I would say, as a higher education scholar, really not what higher education and the university is about. So we need a rethinking of both the university sphere and the public sphere. Not as a singular domain, but as a multiplicity of fragmented and emergent publics, both inside. We need to invite the city into our universities. We need to invite the government into our universities. We need to invite the industries and the culture and the museums and the libraries and the children and the mosquitoes into our universities. And vice versa, we also need to go out of the university, out into the libraries. Like I had public exams at the public library in Aarhus. I've had academics in residence, like artists in residence as students, just doing their master thesis, not as some project for the company, but in the side of the company, surrounded by the companies. It was still like a philosophy, useless kind of master thesis, but it was done there to showcase how academia look in action, how the university look in action, to have mutual respect. Not that we completely understand each other. So here, we need to have a university that becomes a site of public scholarship. And we can think about things like community halls, libraries, salons, public talks, music festivals, playgrounds, all these things where people, creatures intermingle. And think about how do we create a university that are so and so for us all here. So some of the things needed here is to invite for this hybrid public engagement. We should not be in the service of society, industry, the public. They should not be in the service of us. But again, thinking about all we just talked about, we should be playful together. We should be solidariske. That's a Danish word. I don't think there's one in English. Show solidarity towards each other. We should have citizen dialogues and societal co-creation. Not about what is needed, because then that would close the future, but about the world we see as preferable, the society our children would want. Perhaps we should listen more to those, even though they're very naive and utopian. They might have some of the right visions. They're actually capable perhaps of taking the hard choices. So how can we help them help us? Sometimes I think that in Denmark, even though we're green, we're really not, according to our children. We should have public academic partnerships to cultivate, and they should be cultivated through civic engagement, and dissolve these boundaries between the university and society, between the university and city, is something we work with in the EU project. Like, how much is this university actually a part of the city? Is it an international university? Is it a global university? I think we should not be global. We should have a signature. We should be someone. We should also be in service of the local communities to work. Otherwise, we are a nowhere university. We want to be a now here university. So to achieve this in a more concrete way, the university must act as a networking and networked institution, fostering these hybrid learning ecologies where we go outside with our students, we go inside with our students, we go everywhere, and everywhere goes in us to interview these academic and societal domains. This also have consequences for the university, as we talk about in Nørgård Bengtsen's publication on the networking university. So it also entails that university is kind of co-owned. So we own it, but perhaps also our citizens own it. Our local industries, local cultures, local museums perhaps also have ownership of it, co-ownership of it. Like we own the city, like the university should be able to go anywhere in the city, work with anyone, they should be open to us and so on. So we should be entering these transformative partnership again, the core contribution of the EU project I'm working on. This gives the opportunity of having institutional societal co-creation, and that the university actually become a societal driver locally, but then also globally, and perhaps even globally, even though that would never be the point, I would say. And as trust consolidates between our local actors, we can make them our champions. That is also what we do in the EU project. We have creative industries championing the research institutions. We are championing the cultural museums, and they're championing us. So we are working together. Like, for once, we, higher education, the university is not working for itself, but working for the others, and vice versa. And that's way nicer than having to fight your own battle on your own all the time. Especially if you, like me, come from the humanities, they're really not that well liked in Denmark. They're very useless. And also very annoying, actually. So this requires that we have learning activities that are actually designed to foster local engagement, local cultures, local communities, committed collaboration between academic and societal actors on the ground, in the dirt, every day. So universities should cultivate these trust-based, invested partnership. So we don't leap for culture, we don't leap for society, we don't leap for industry, but we come together in the middle and try to figure out what we can do together that we cannot do on our own. Also, again, like a hard experience from the EU project is it's way easier to just do things on your own than work together with people that have like different value systems, different understandings of methods and knowledge and usefulness and everything else. So we should not do what we can do ourselves. We should really go for something we could never do on our own. And what is that? That's a big question. And we should also not just help each other by providing stuff into each other's sectors, but we should build that thing together over time. 3 years, as in the EU project, or a whole course, as I've done in my teachings, or perhaps a lifetime. Almost there. I have 3 minutes left, I can see. So, taken to its extreme, but the world is extreme these days, the university must also rewild and rewiden the institutions and its pedagogy designed for planetary care, ecological entanglement, and solar punk futures. So we just talked about the city hall, the local communities, but we also have our local worlds. I know we don't like the mosquitoes, but we need to do something about it. We need to think about the more than human university. We need to do things that are useless to us, but useful for the world. We need to shift from egocentric to ecocentric perspectives, not to save ourselves. I'm not even sure we are worth saving as a species if we look objectively at it, but to perhaps to save the world. So how to regenerate relationships with the more than human world, how to have planetary life at the university, how to have a university for the planet, how to have a university that's entangled with the planet, with the world, with the animals. Do we invite them in? Can we have a university that becomes a worlding institution that is of and for the world, and one that does not merely act in the world on our behalf, but is for the world, about cohabiting with and co-owned by diverse species, sites, and futures? So here, higher education becomes a medium for planetary storytelling. We need to tell the stories of our planet, of the mosquitoes. No one else will, and the mosquito has a very hard time having a voice, I would say. Someone needs to be there for them. But also the oak trees, also the mockingbirds, also all sorts of other cultures. And we need to figure out how to do that, because we've never done that before. We probably never had to, but I think we have to now. We need to move into hopeful futures. We also need to move beyond the human egocentric sphere. So I'm trying to move ahead in my head here. So we should have, and I don't know what that means, but we should have institutions and pedagogy to be designed to support ecological awareness, multi-species relationship, and planetary ethics. In my ICT-based educational design masters, we had student design with the trees. We had students that had a school for the bees. And we had students that tried to design with the bees as a central actor. And they were really frustrated because they didn't know how to talk to the bees. And I said they should go and talk to the bees, and they didn't know what that meant. And I said, I don't know what it means, but you know, we need to try. And then they made a school where the bees and the children could coexist. They were on both terms. I don't know if they ever learned really to talk to the bees, but it really gave them another mindset. The same with the trees. It ended up being a concept where children went out to nature and hugged a tree and adopted a tree and talked to it and wrote poems to it and put it in there, and perhaps that also makes a little difference. I don't know how much they learned about oak trees, but I think they learned something very important about trees, at least. So, summing up, chaotically. Because I also want some time for questions. Or you can see what you missed. You missed the most orderly one here. You have the 4 themes, and then like these advice. You can have them. I already talked about them. But where I want to end is to think about both futures and hopepunk transformation, and say that each implication and action we take is not a fix. And then I want to go here as well. 2 seconds. Each implication and action we take is not a fix, but a reimagining. A shift from the university as an instrumental system to the university as a living, ethical, poetic, playful, planetary, and participatory life world. This, I would say, is how we move not just from good to great, but from now to next, toward bold institutions that resist despair through hope-punk imagination, that dare to have radical care and dare to enter into playful co-creation. And I think we'll skip the last one here. And just a short advertisement for tomorrow's workshop, because there we'll actually play together. We also play together in our minds now, but more concretely, and try to create some universities that are worth having, write a poem as an academic method, and think about how we can live, learn, and feel otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we have the Q&A. Now, we have been collecting questions on our WooClap. So we're going to display some questions, but at the same time, there should be mics. Where are the mics? So we have, thank you. We have mics that we can pass around. If you would like to just raise your hand and ask a question, that would be great as well. Here's the QR code again. As I said, there would be almost like a 10-minute Q&A session right now. If you don't get to ask your questions, please repost them again for the panel discussion later, okay?
And you can really ask me anything.
Ask her anything, okay.
Yeah.
Now, I think if you're on WooClap, you will see that there are some questions that have emerged at the top, because you're allowed to upvote some questions. So I'm going to read one of them that has more votes. All right. In the current neoliberal system, many students internalize the role of the university as an institution that prepares them to join the workforce. This may create some resistance among students to the spirit of a playful university. How would you reconcile this ontological difference in what a university is and get the buy-in of the students in reimagining a playful university?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something I really struggle with. So I've been teaching playful higher education courses for 10 years, from engineering students to psychology students to students from religion, philosophy, and so on and so forth. And I think that's a challenge we really need to take seriously. So I actually mean it when I say, like, they don't really want to play, they don't like the feeling of being playful. It makes them really despairing and angry and frightened for all sorts of reasons, because we brought them up in an entirely different system. So something so discomforting must be because I don't know what I'm doing as a teacher. So what I actually do is the first 2 full sessions, we are going through the learning goals and the curriculum and the assessment goals, and I say, okay, we're going to do this crazy thing because this and this and this learning goal. We're going to do this crazy thing because this and this and this learning goal. And I can even like say, and normally, you know, it doesn't go bad. It normally goes quite well. And in the end, it might make sense, but if it doesn't, it's also okay, because then we tried this thing. That's one thing I do. The other thing is to be there with them the whole time, really talking them through their frustration and then in the end, they come to a place where like, okay, so you really mean it when you say that you're interested in what I really want to pursue. Like, it's not a trick question. And if I do this risky, strange thing, you won't punish me at the exam? Like, for real? Are you asking me to make a fairy tale as part of my exam, or whatever it might be? And I think that's really important. So the last thing I would say is, I think what I also learned is that if we convince them, I think it's the right word, if we convince them to take that kind of risk and then punish them at the exam, whatever well-meaning we will, but if that's their experience, then that's one thing that is quite sure, and that is they will never do that again. So if we take that risk, we really need to be there with them and make sure that they might take that risk again. Otherwise, we should rather not. Then we make more harm than good.
Thank you. Does anyone want to grab the mic? Yes. We have, yes, please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Meng Hua. I'm from NTU. Thank you very much for your very interesting and thought-provoking, I would say even highly imaginable presentation. I really enjoyed it very much. And the question I have is actually that in the presentation, you touch on many important principles, especially like playfulness, things like that. But I did not see anything you mentioned about how we can really embrace teaching and learning based on the finding of cognitive science, which is, I'm talking about brain-based learning pedagogy. In fact, I would say that if there's a really urgent need, if you really want to really do a paradigm shift of higher education, then I think we have to really educate our educators, professors, lecturers, and so on and so forth, teachers, to be knowledgeable about how the brain learns and processes information. And because by doing so, then we can then come up with strategies to really engage a student in this deep cognitive kind of learning, where you have really a deep learning going on. I think it is even more crucial that in the age of AI revolution, we have to really prepare them for this higher order thinking skill. I mean, if you look at what World Economic Forum is talking about, the top 10 skills and all that, they are all essentially higher order thinking skills. And I think it's interesting that among the top 10 skills identified by the World Economic Forum, one of them is talking about active learning strategy. So I just like to hear your comments. In fact, a lot of the things that you talk about, they are really part and parcel of the brain-based learning pedagogy. But I think it's very crucial that our educators, whether lecturer, professor, or instructor, they have to be knowledgeable about how the brain learns. And I think this is like saying that we are all in the teaching profession. Many of us have been here for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But do we really know how the brain learns? And if educators without knowing how the brain learns, it's a bit like I'm trying to design a glove without knowing a hands look like. I think I'd just like to hear the comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would say I'm not in cognitive science, and I think one thing I would say is I'm very aware of that. I'm aware of where I'm coming from and who I need to do something meaningful. So, for example, if you take the area of playful higher education, so at Aarhus University, we have Savannah Schultz, which is within cognitive science. Then we have me, which is more kind of in philosophy and pedagogy, critical pedagogy, perhaps. And then you have other things with learning theories, like my colleague and so on. And then you have the students. And then you have the educational developers that are trying to develop curricular or learning activities, or even learning management systems that are more playful. So I think what we actually need is to come together rather than win as a field. And again, this meeting in the middle, cross-disciplinary thing, I think is even more important now for higher education, because the fields are developing, like the field is growing. And so there was at one time, like, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, where we could perhaps like have an overview. I have no overview of higher education, I can say. I have an overview of my field, kind of. And I know there are synergies because they're well established. But for something of this to make sense, I think we should sit around a table and discuss, okay, if we want to, like, first of all, what kind of institution do we want to be? Do we want to be a playful institution, a speculative institution, a poetic institution? They are really different institutions. What kind of signature do we want our university to have? And then how can we make that from the bottom up by figuring out the values? I would say that's the role of the philosopher and the pedagogist, the pedagogical principles and the values. Then how do we enact them in concrete learning activities and pedagogies? I think that's where learning theories, cognitive science, stuff like that comes in. And then we have the surface level, which is not a bad level, but that is about the materials. Should we play with GenAI? Generative AI, should we play with certain kind of materials? Should we play with Lego? What are then the things? But they need to be connected across, I think, for this to work. And I think, at least in Denmark, it might be very different here, but without mentioning names, but at least in Denmark, we have kind of lost a little bit grasp of the pedagogical virtues and values, because we are so focused on the competency level that we might teach a lot of competencies that are void of existential qualities or virtues like solidarity or magnanimity, or I can never say that word, stuff like that, care. You don't need to be careful at the university as long as you get the competencies and take the exams. And I think we need to reconsider this. And for that, we might also need cognitive science.
Perhaps we have time for one last question. I am seeing a number of really good questions here. I would encourage you to repost them. I mean, there's one on generative AI and how does that work with hopepunk and the embodiment of the university. There is a poem about a mosquito as well. Please do read it through. It's lovely. It's lovely. Does anyone want to own up for writing this poem? No. Generative AI? Okay. Now, this one that has the next highest number of votes is a question on, let me see. Oh, there's also one on how Trump is tearing down academia. And what we should do about that. Now, this one is the next one with the highest vote. So I'm going to read this, and please do repost them again later. Is there a measurement for playfulness in teaching and learning, or is it ironic to even have a measurement for it? If so, how do we measure success for playful learning?
Yeah, I think one thing here, and I'm mindful of time because you also want a break. Not necessarily from me, right? But just to, yeah. I think what we can do with these kinds of questions is to try and say them aloud. So can you be a successful player? Can you be successful at playing? I would say yes, actually. There's someone that do not know how to play, never learned how to be playful. And then someone that, I don't know, by accident practiced it their whole life. And then it just happened. So I didn't have any friends. So I played a lot with myself in the forest, in my own mind. So I'm very, very good at playing in my head. I might be less good at playing with others. I don't know. So these kind of things. So yes, we can learn to be successful at being playful also in our academic practices, in our study practices. It's something that has to be learned, obviously. How do we measure it? Depending on, again, if we like that word or not. But let's use the language we have, measure and assess it. Then we need to listen differently, I would say. So we can measure it, we can see the impact, we can assess it, but not with the tools or the lenses we have now. So what I assess, for example, or measure in my students is the boldness of an idea. So it becomes very subjective again, but it was never objective. So hey, we are just back at square one. The boldness of their idea, the depth of their work. So have they really tried to work through it in academic sense? Like they want to create a bathtub for mosquitoes. Now I'm trying to make something really weird here. And I'm like, okay, but what do we know about mosquitoes? And they go and perhaps they do something in biology and like, okay, but what is actually the philosophy of animals we do not like? Oh my God, okay. So go and read something else. They come back. Yeah, but we want to make a bathtub. Okay, but what do the mosquito really want? I don't know. And then we look at that work and see how they played with the world and the words and the concepts and the concreteness of it all and how it comes together in some sort of argument for why I'm playing in this way with these kind of things towards this thing. And I think that is the measurement of playfulness. Does it make sense to the one that plays, to the ones that are involved in the play, which is also mosquitoes, and for someone even looking outside in on what goes on? And does it look beautiful? I think we need to have beauty come back into our assessment as well. I would like that.